seeing Yamim Noraim through the eyes of Buddhist practice, both in Buddhism and in Judaism, there are myriad models to describe this spiritual path. And the spiritual path is related to the different experiences of the relative and the absolute, the self and selflessness, right? We all start from self. We all have a name, we were born, we've been indoctrinated, we've been socialized in terms of coming to practice. That's the relative, that's the language of the relative. In Hebrew, you can use that as the ani, all right? Ani, I am Rami, ani. Other side of that, you know, the ideal of the fully realized arahat, or a person, you know, the enlightened person, or possibly a prophet, right? Moshe was lo haya k'Moshe roeh v'mebit, navi v'mebit. There was no clear seer like Moshe, Moses, who could observe, mabit, and navi, a vessel. And that means that he had access to this experience of the absolute in the Buddhist language, or shunyata. And in the Hebrew language, you can talk about Ein Sof, you can talk about Anochi, which is just like the Ani in Hebrew, Aleph Nun Yud, and Anochi is Aleph Nun Chaf Yud. So there's an addition of the whole gematria about the Chaf representing Chokhmah and wisdom. But there is a spectrum. There's a spectrum. There is a wonderful teaching in Zen. I would love to actually do a whole teaching on this around. It's called the 5 ranks of Tozan, which teach about the different relationships between the relative and the absolute. The relative coming out from the absolute, recognizing absolute. The absolute manifesting in the relative. Relative and the absolute coexisting. So there's a whole spectrum of moving. And again, remember that everything is permanent. Our state of mind is never just enlightened, just bitul, right? We move through it. Somebody says something and here we are responding like a 12-year-old, right? So just bringing a little compassion into our dynamic mind. So there's a lot of different maps to this. And I would even say, and this is where I'll start tying it into the King language in Rosh Hashanah, is that even the Jewish calendar itself could be seen as a spectrum of relationship between the relative and the absolute. That every sacred day, that we just call it a holiday, oh, Simchat Torah, oh, this, is an invitation to explore a different combination or different place on that spectrum between the relative and the absolute, between the Ani and the Anochi. So long story short, Yamim Noraim, and specifically, you know, we kind of started with Rosh Hashanah, right? HaMelech, right? The king. We use all of this language. So for me, the way I treat this and the way I move through it, and somebody actually was so amused that I'm so open to the language of king. You know, as an Israeli, secular Israeli, you know, it's like, I wouldn't touch this stuff, you know, with a 10-foot pole, and now I love it. It doesn't mean that it's the only form of God, but I recognize that when I'm in the most contracted self, right? When I'm in the most contracted self, when I'm in my childish self, when I'm in my completely blended with my psychological self, there is no space, there's no anochi, there's no not even connection with awareness. I'm just completely blended in my own dream, bringing the word dream again. I don't want to use this as a value judgment, but that's the state of mind of a child. That's the state of mind of a servant. That's the state of mind that needs the parent. That's the state of mind that responds to authoritative leaders. And you know what? So, and this is where I kind of goes back to what I spoke of before about karma, and there's no running away from karma. So Rosh Hashanah, if I'm looking at these holidays at different portals into different permutations of self and selflessness, in a way, it gives me an opportunity to completely surrender into my child self. Actually not fight it, because as an adult, I'm constantly trying to show up as an adult, right? I'm supposed to be an adult in the room. I need to like somehow get it together. So from a tantric point of view, and this is where I'm using now the Vajrayana language, which is the third vehicle. So I didn't touch on this. So the three vehicles in Buddhism are the Hinayana or the Theravada, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. The Theravada one is all about renunciation. And where do you study renunciation? At a monastery. You have an abbot, you have a king, and they tell you, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you go to bed at 9, and I'm telling you where to sit, and I'm telling you when to eat. You have a king. That's the language, and that's the state of mind that kind of training brings you, and it's powerful, right? It's powerful. There's something about having the conditions to not needing to make any decisions. Somebody is telling me what to do. The second vehicle is the Mahayana, which is where Zen comes in, and parts of the Tibetan Buddhism that talks about equating. So this is where we're starting equating, meaning I'm not fully immersed, I'm not completely lost in Ein Sof, in Shunyata, right? I'm still engaging with the world. The world is God. The world is the realm of manifestation. That's the second vehicle. In our language, or kind of like the Jewish language, I would say, that would be when we start talking about the language of the beloved. When you do a Kabbalat Shabbat, you're no longer talking about a God that is a king, right? All of a sudden, the hierarchy of the servant and the parent, or the child and the parent, is shifting, right? There's a little bit of a courtship, and there's yearning, and all of a sudden it's like there's play. That's a different relationship, right? So you could say, and I'm doing a very kind of rough thinking here, but that could be a Mahayanist thought, right? There's another, again, in the spectrum of this interrelationship between the self and selflessness, the relative and the absolute, there is a wonderful teaching, I don't remember exactly the source of it right now, I can look it up later, that talks about, and this is a Hasidic teaching, that talks about the Kruvim, on the angels on the Ark of Covenant, and being in relationship with God like that, like twins, and it used the words twins, right? So we had a king and a servant, we had a beloved, and then you had twins. And now we're starting to get into a place that is starting to, this is definitely a Mahayana, right? That I am, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. I am literally the other, and I'm responding to the world because the other is me. My twin is hungry, and I feel it because we share the womb. And I love it because it plots this spectrum of relationality of the relative and absolute. Like, what's the deal here, man? It's like Bernie Glassman, my last Buddhist teacher, would used to say, like, what's the deal here, man? So we're like, Yamim Noraim, like, what's the deal here, man? So this is where we go into the third vehicle in Buddhism, which is the Vajrayana, and that practice, and really this is total Kabbalah. This is just the experience of the Vajrayanist or the Kabbalist, or I would bring here the Zohar, the Zoharic. If those of you who would like to read that or look into the Book of Radiance, Zohar, the Zoharic experience is the experience of, I'll reduce it in a very simple way, of everything is workable. That's a line from Trungpa Rinpoche, with a Tibetan 20th century Tibetan master. He would say everything is workable. It's so workable. This is where the chaos of the tohu and the tehom and all of this suffering of the world is completely their enlightened reality. And the Vajrayanist or the Zoharic Kabbalist engages the world in a malleable way. This is the place of the shaman, right? This is the place of transmutation, and particularly going into the poisons. And this is the language of Vajrayana, of transmuting poisons. You're not just renunciating, I'm putting the poison aside. I'm not just trying to alleviate the suffering that is before me. I'm pursuing the poison. So this is why Bernie Glassman, again, my Buddhist teacher, would go and do these bearing witness retreats in Auschwitz, and I would go with him, because that's the poison. That's where the greatest suffering is, and he wouldn't just shy away from it. He'd say, "We're going to go there, and we're going to sit there." So for me, that is how I see the language and the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It gives me the opportunity in a contained space, and hopefully to actually be in a space that allows this, either internally or with a community, to be the koan, right? That's how you practice koans in Zen. You be the koan. That's the teacher will constantly tell you, be the koan. So be the servant, be the child. Allow yourself to experience all of the most jealous, angry, spiteful, all of the things that we go to therapy for, right? Because we just want to kind of get better. But we're one of the reasons that we're not, again, on a psychological level, the therapy kind of stops because we're not fully letting our body feel that. So what is it like to actually go into a space and say, and cry out to a king, to cry out to a parent, "Mommy, Daddy, I need you. Why did you ignore me when I was growing up? I demand you, I beseech you, but I demand you. Pay attention to me." This is where it gets into a cognitive kung fu. And this is why this is like a, advanced, like, it's an invitation to an advanced practice. Because if we are anchored in our practice, and the practice is, again, it's very simple. It's to be anchored in our awareness. Awareness is this portal to the Nondual. Awareness is the portal to this king. So if I can actually manifest my outmost contraction while seeing it, bearing witness to it, with this non-dual awareness that is right there. I don't need to indulge in it. I don't need to create a big drama. I don't need to act out. But to really allow this child servant to manifest and then see it. That's how you manifest the Quran. That's how you break through. The dream that we used the language before is what the eye of awareness sees, right? The child servant doesn't see the dream because he's completely in it. He's like, or they're completely in that psychological self. So it's, right? So when we dream, we think we're dreaming. We're completely in it. But when we're lucid dreaming, we're aware that we're dreaming. That's the job of the awareness. Sometimes we're there, sometimes we're not. You may agree with me that there is an assumption that the high holidays or the holidays in general are supposed to be the cathartic moments, right? We're supposed to go to a shul and we're supposed to somehow, pray something, and we're supposed to have that moment. I give up on that. I let go of that. One thing that I noticed is that there is a pent-up energy, right? There's something about it. And some of it is actually very childish, right? Part of it is there's a part of me that is very young, and he wants or needs to be a good Jew. It's kind of embarrassing to say this, right? But maybe you have a similar experience. And that experience is being pent up, doing Elul and all of the self-work and all of that stuff. And it's somehow all of this needs to be released. So one thing that I really learned is to, first of all, not expect that cathartic moment. Part of what this ritual does, it reminds me and it tells me, be on the lookout for this every day of your life. All right. Remember atonement. Remember, it's good to think about your actions. All right. It's delivered in such a bombastic way. But if I take out the expectation that it's supposed to be a big cathartic moment, it's just driving the nail home. Okay, I get the message. And it could be that my aha moment, and I'll let go of a grievance that I have, or maybe I'll forgive someone, will happen somewhere in March. Who cares? When is that happening? Okay, so let's just acknowledge that, kind of release the expectation or the need for that to be the big cathartic moment. The need for the ritual, and then like, oh, they're asking me, like, I'm supposed to now have that. So the ritual is just a way to kind of build it up. If you have a cathartic moment, yay for you. It could be that you do have it. I sometimes had it. Wonderful. But just if it's there, it's there. And if not, the ritual just kind of gets it into the system. The second part that I want to talk about is really that we just have this. It's like we just have this Shpilkes, right? We have this thing. It just does this thing around these holidays, and it just does this thing. And part of what I was talking about, fully embodying it, is like really just embody it. Maybe that's the voice of that child that feels nervous, connecting it to the being, wanting to be a good Jew, wanting to be a good boy, being a good girl, right? It's all related. But I want to name this is that, as practitioners, in a way, we're trying to be very effortful, which is kind of goes against every, all the Zen teachings, right? We're trying to be like, practice well, right? What if we just go and just enjoy the music? I know that for me, if you put me in a shul and you start doing some Yananainais and some Nigunim and some Fregish, oh my God, I'm just like, oh, like what a relief. I don't care, like what is it? It's like, so it's also an invitation to just really just enjoy our culture. This is part of, again, the karma doesn't have to be our shamanic moment of shedding away, the old self and all this. Like, being in the space of our ancestors in that way is already doing works on our karma, is already releasing and moving karma through us. You don't actually have to work so hard. As practitioners that have a goal to realize ourselves and see reality as it is, to clarify our awareness, has a lot of self in it. There's a lot of efforting. All of this efforting from in the Buddhist language is about letting go, maybe surrender if you're open to that language, but letting go definitely. That at the end of the day, the only free will that we have is to be aware. Whether we are completely in the trenches of our karma, whether we're manifesting our ugliest, most angry self, or our most loving and nurturing way, all of this is just karma unfolding. There is nothing but karma. The only practice that we can do, to the extent that we can do, is to be aware of it. Period. So in that way, if I find myself in a shul, I'm letting karma unfold. If I'm getting angry in the shul because I don't feel like they're kind of like scratching that itch or making like the way that I would, that is also karma unfolding. The bitul is exactly getting out of the way. The great way is not difficult, right? That's the Faith Mind Sutra. The great mind is not difficult. Just avoid picking and choosing. If we're talking about language of king and we're talking, what is it like to actually take on the possibility that there's a greater mystery at play here? And the extent of my participation in it is to be aware. If I'm blessed with additional insights or capacity to actually help creation, and this is what the Kabbalists were doing, the Kabbalist mission is to actually affect the Godhead. So that's why they're doing the mitzvot. It's not just because they need to or want to. It's because when they're doing tikkun, they are healing the Godhead. So if we're blessed with an access to such powers or such insights, how wonderful. I had a Buddhist teacher one who said, somebody asked him, like, what do you do when you're enlightened? And he said, like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just practice. As long as you need to practice, practice. The Hebrew word that I use for karma is keren. Keren Yeshuah, Keren Rashaim, right? The emanation of evil, or the emanation of revelation and redemption. So Keren, I love that. In my practice and the way I'm orienting in the world, I shift the language between karma and ancestors. For me, there's no difference. There's no difference between saying my karma is this or my karma is that. There is nothing but karma, and there's nothing but ancestors. Whether you think about it in terms of biological DNA, whether we're talking about some kind of a intergenerational movement of energies, it gives it a personified form. But it means that I'm entering that realm that Bob was naming, where everything, including our thoughts. So when I have a thought, right, a thought is a karmic event, right? My attachment to the thought is a karmic event. It's a little clinical, that's the thing. So I think I know, at least my clinician, I don't know if it's a Jewish analytical intellectual clinician, it's a little cold to just say, oh, it's my karma. I can kind of brush it off, or maybe I'm more prone to bypass it. But the moment that I say it's my ancestors, wow, I'm getting angry about somebody, and my anger is an ancestor. All of a sudden, it's a different relationship. All of a sudden, my heart is involved. I'm not just trying to be a clinician of my brain. And I'm actually working in a much vaster world than just myself. It could be that I'm even working with somebody else's ancestors. So I'm dislodging it from the particular. I'm dislodging it from the personal. And when you imagine, this is where I kind of bring back the Zoharic language of the book of the Zohar, is the radiance is ancestors. The radiance is karma through and through. The mountains are ancestors. The mountains are karma. And am I aware? Period. And this is how you turn around all of these questions about, the book of Job, right? It's all about like, why do bad things happen to good people, right? And all of that stuff. When you go into that realm of looking at ancestors, karma, keren, you're already in the realm of the non-personal. But the way I move through grievances, it helps me to move through grievances. And this is why, again, the place of forgiveness, and look at this, we're moving into Yom Kippur, right? And like, it's all about forgiveness. This is why forgiveness, again, actually Yom Kippur it's not about forgiveness with other people. You're expected to do that throughout the year. The ultimate grievance is with God. Really. Yeah. How could my mother die when I was 18? Come on, God. What were you thinking? Really? So the grievance, really, it's the ultimate grievance, is always towards something that is so mysterious. And this is, in a way, the potentiality that Yom Kippur can offer us is, can I move my grievances into, can I literally throw everything at this person, God? Can I be as angry as I need with them? Be aware of how this has manifested and maybe infected my body for the last 20, 40 years, that pain. And then again, I don't want to just say, oh, it's just awareness and see it from a clinical point of view. Okay, so we're practitioners and our awareness sees our pain. Maybe the therapists among us like that. But I am in full conviction that this totality is present. This totality is present. And when we are allowing ourselves to be seen and be vulnerable, we get in touch with that presence. And that's where the karma gets released.